everyone. It's nice to see you. Courtney Scarrett, Director of College Counseling. I'm joined by Michael Lyles, and our colleague Carrie Smith is on the links cheering on her daughter, who is in the regional championship for golf this morning. So we're sending Carrie and Haley our good wishes. So we're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us for our final coffee of the academic year. I know it's a cliche, but I can't believe that we're here, just days away from May 1, and our senior class is almost put to bed, which is pretty incredible. This morning, we're going to be talking about really understanding college costs. There has been a remarkable shift in the last 5 years with the transparency around information as it comes to accessing college costs, understanding how much financial aid a family can receive, and it really has been remarkable, and we've noticed a difference in our office in that the conversations that we can have with families are so much more informative and data-driven than they ever have been before around scholarships and financial aid. And so what we're hoping to do this morning is to give you a sense of what the tools are out there. And then we'll finish up our program this morning. There's been some news from SAT and ACT about their testing calendars for the 17-18 and 18-19 school years. So we wanted to get some dates out to you and just let you know what's been going on in that landscape. But we'll talk a little bit about understanding college costs, and it's so funny. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, and I feel like every parent program, every college admissions information session, the very last piece of information shared is financial aid and scholarships. And I really wish that it was the very first thing that was shared. The hardest conversations, and I know I speak for Micah and myself, the hardest conversations that we have in our office with families are about financing college and paying for college. And so if you take nothing else away from this time together this morning, it's to just please have an authentic conversation with yourself, with your spouse, with your partner, with your daughter, because we have had those moments where a student has been allowed to fall in love with an institution, and on April 27th, it comes to light that that's not an affordable option for the family, whether it be for lack of scholarships or financial aid. And so what we're hoping again today is to get some information out there. We work very closely with families in the junior and senior year to build college lists towards affordability. I think more than ever before, affordability is a conversation across the economic spectrum. We here at Hockaday have families at every single point of the economic spectrum. And it really is such a joy to be able to work with diverse families. And so we're gonna show you I'm gonna show you three main resources before I shift it over to Mr. Lyles, who will talk a little bit about scholarships. But the first, when you start thinking about financing college, the first piece you want to start looking at is how much it costs, right? Just a bottom line, what's the cost of attendance going to be? And we find that the most helpful resource is College Board's Big Future. And our notes will include all of the links that I'm going to share with you today. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and we'll get information to you. So Big Future is the college's search engine. And so I'm going to start with our friends up in North Carolina, and I've decided that I'm really curious about Wake Forest. My daughter has mentioned it. She has a friend who wears a t-shirt, and so we're going to start talking about Wake Forest. They may have won a basketball game a long time ago. So right from the start, you'll see some really basic information about Wake. Sort of admission deadline, the size. If you pop over to paying, you'll start to see some numbers. Now, we know that Wake Forest is a private institution, and so it doesn't matter. You'll notice in-state versus out-of-state is exactly the same. Something to know about cost of attendance is that colleges package all of the costs associated with an undergraduate, a year of undergraduate institution into cost of attendance. So you'll see tuition and fees, you'll see room and board, you'll see books and supplies, as well as estimated personal expenses and transportation expenses. So they've estimated based on the average student experience. So you'll see, estimated personal expenses, that's everything from sheets for the bed to pizza with friends on a Friday night. And so although they're saying the sticker price is $66,000 or so, there can be some fluctuation in there depending on how far you are from the institution and what your daughter's lifestyle is going to be. You'll also notice at different institutions that room and board will vary based on dorm style. I started my admissions career at Boston University when the new John Hancock Student Center was being built, and they had spectacular 35-story dorms, and of course the cost got greater as the view got better. So you can do a little bit of digging to find out really what your daughter's room and board is going to be. Now, what's fabulous about Big Future is if we go up here to financial aid by the numbers, the college, Wake Forest, has provided College Board with a much more detailed picture of the financial aid packages. So, and what you'll really want to pay attention to is our three pieces. You want to look at the percent of need met, you want to look at the distribution of loans and scholarships, and you want to look at the indebtedness at graduation, which ironically enough, Wake Forest, if we scroll down, doesn't post, but I'll show you another institution that does. Now, what I'm looking for, so when I'm sitting with a student who has informed me that, yes, Mrs. Garrett, we need to be looking at merit scholarships, we need to be looking at financial aid, this is the first tool that I pull up. So what we're doing with the girls is we're helping them build their list, and then we layer on top of that the financial aid piece. And so the first information that I look at is, will they meet 100% of demonstrated need? So if the family's need is, if it's $60,000, if the family can contribute $20,000, so that's a need of 40, right? So Wake will say, in the form of grants and scholarships and loans, we'll give you that $40,000. What colleges will often do, and I'll show you one in a minute that does that, is that colleges will often gap, meaning that they will not meet 100% of need. So if the need is $40,000, an institution might say, no, we'll give you $30,000, meaning that there's a gap of $10,000 that has to be added on to loans, has to be added on to the estimated family contribution. So that's one piece, and I did a little bit of research, and there are actually 788 four-year institutions that meet 100% of demonstrated need. So there's lots of schools out there that have the deep pockets like Wake does that says we've made a commitment to meet your full need. Again, you'll see 75% of scholarships and grants, 23% loan. So if I had a family in my office that was considering financial aid, this is an institution that I would feel very comfortable leaving on that list. We know Wake and know that they have wonderful financial aid. So let's pull up another one. Let's look. So students looking in South Carolina. I think I'm also, she's thinking about science. Let's check out Clemson. North Carolina, go a little south, South Carolina. So we'll pull up Clemson. So the difference between Wake Forest and Clemson is the fact that Wake is private and Clemson is public. And so oftentimes families will say, well, we're only going to look at public institutions because we know that they tend to be a little less expensive. And if we go to Clemson's bottom line for out-of-state students, you're right, it's about $20,000 cheaper than Wake Forest. So at first glance, you're absolutely right, it is less expensive. But again, if we start digging into the numbers, the first thing you'll see is that they only meet 61% of demonstrated needs. So there's going to be a gap there. So right there we know that the financial aid may not be as great as it was at Wake Forest. You'll also look that there's a higher percentage of loans. So basically a 60-40 split. So there might be a few more loans packaged in there. But we'll also scroll down and look at the average indebtedness at graduation. So when a student graduates from Clemson, on average, they have about $30,000 in loan. To give you a point of comparison, for the college graduating class of 2016, the average indebtedness was $37,000. And so, ironically, Clemson at 30 isn't all that bad if we think of four-year loans. You all will hear stories on NPR, you will read about them in the New York Times, students graduating from college with 75,000 plus more. We have had students come into our office and say, I really, really, really want to go to NYU, and we look and say, it's not worth $65,000 in loans to do that. And so we always appreciate it when families bring in the financial aid packages. We can look at them together. We will do that. We'll analyze them with a family. But that's one of the main conversations that we'll have is looking at the loan. And when we're working on financial aid, or scholarships, we don't just look at 1 year at a time. We really do look at the cost over the span of 4 years. So one of the takeaways from this is, yes, Clemson has a slightly smaller sticker price, right? So it's a little less expensive, but it might cost more out of pocket. It might cost more in the long term because of loans. And so that's a point of conversation that we have. And so, and also Clemson doesn't meet full needs. So let's have a little bit of a conversation about what need is. We do a wonderful program that some of you may have already attended and will likely do it again next year with Michael Scott, who's the Vice President for Admissions and Financial Aid over at TCU. And Mike has a great saying. He said, no family has ever called me or come into my office to thank me for their financial aid award. Not that, nobody will ever stay there and say, thank you, this is exactly what I need. And there is, I think there's often sometimes a misconception between what a family thinks that they need in terms of aid and scholarship and what is readily available and what is determined by the federal government as well as the institution. So what's been really refreshing is, again, these tools, and it started in 2011. The Obama administration mandated and actually came tagged onto Obamacare that every single institution receiving federal aid has to establish a net price calculator on their financial aid website. And so what a net price calculator does, and I'll pull up Vanderbilt's, is it allows the family to input data from home to find out what an estimated aid package would be. And any of you can do this. They can be found on financial aid websites at any of the institutions that our girls look at. And so as we start thinking about need and what Mike Scott is looking for when he's evaluating a financial aid award is that total cost of attendance minus the estimated family contribution. So when they look at income taxes, when they look at salary, when they look at assets, how much money can a family put forth for their child's education? And so what's really helpful is that these net price calculators have come along. I'll be honest, these caused a bit of fear in the hearts of financial aid counselors. When this first hit the news, all of our colleagues were telling us, don't have families use them because it was giving up control, right? What they were worried about were families would be sitting in their living room at home pretending they were financial aid advisors. And we've actually noticed that the complete opposite has been true. We've had families use these throughout the years, and we've had admission officers share with us that the data that you get at home is within 3 to 4% of the financial aid award that your daughter will receive in senior year. And so they're really spot on. Last year I had a senior do 12 of these, and it was almost identical to the aid package that she got later on in the year. Now the caveat is that it's only as good as the information that you put in, right? So making sure that you have accurate data. And what's been helpful is this year was the first year that financial aid offices were using prior data. So this came forth, it was in the news last year. So our senior, what that means is that for the federal and institution methodology, they're using tax information from 2 years prior. So for our seniors this year, class of 2017, their families were using 2015 tax data. So for our sophomores, you will be using tax data from this year for your daughter's financial aid package. Form 1, you'll be using it for 2018. So what this has enabled you to do as a family is once you do your daughter's taxes, junior year, you can sit down at a net price calculator. As we're in our office working on her list with her, she'll come home and say, okay, Mrs. Garrett and I put together this list of 10 schools, let's sit down and do the net price calculator, and you can start to get a sense of what those aid packages will look like. So I did the net price calculator for Vanderbilt yesterday. It took me less than 10 minutes. It asked me about income taxes, it asked about assets and home. It was ironic, Vanderbilt actually asked a question about independent school tuition. Are you paying private school tuition for other siblings, college tuition for other siblings? So it's a really fascinating exercise if you do 2 or 3 of these to start seeing the range. And I would encourage you to fill out a net price calculator for an institution like a Vanderbilt that has a significant endowment that meets 100% of demonstrated need, and then perhaps do the net price calculator for an institution like TCU, which is known to have less competitive financial aid packages, and it's interesting to see the variance. So Mr. Lyles and I were just down in San Antonio at a conference with 2,000 of our nearest and dearest friends, and a new tool has started to come onto the marketplace, and it's called My Intuition. And this is a group of schools that grew a little frustrated with the net price calculator because they felt that it was too cumbersome for families and it didn't allow for enough of the institution's own methodology. And so this group of schools has established a new tool. It was actually developed by an economist at Wellesley College. It's pretty incredible. And it's a little shorter, it's a little bit more specific. And so My Intuition is now really a complement to the net price calculator that's just coming on the market. I think that's all I have in terms of understanding cost and need-based aid. And I'm going to have Micah pop up to talk a little bit about Maryland scholarships.
Well, good morning. Need is an interesting term, right? One of the things, I went to one of the sessions at the conference, and one of our friends on the college side was talking about that term, need. And very much need is determined by what the federal government algorithm says you can pay for college. But I'll tell you, personal experience through the years, and particularly since you guys are now going to be looking at prior year data, their conversations actually do occur with financial aid offices. And so once that number comes out and it looks not all that accurate because of changes that have happened in your family, there's opportunities to have a conversation. I have about 3 girls this year, and I think what's been interesting to watch is that my girls have handled the conversations, and I have watched financial aid offices be very responsive in taking in the information and coming back and really working with them on that need piece. So as you go through this, keep in mind that need, while it is a concrete term based upon the federal government algorithm, colleges do know that your circumstances change. And so while the net price calculator is a great prediction of what that might look like, there's always some fluctuation in there that happens once you start those conversations, once your daughter chooses where she's going to enroll. So keep need out there as that term in your mind that can be a little bit fluid at times. So the thing about scholarships that we do know is, generally speaking, the most money is available coming directly from the institution where your daughter chooses to apply. Looking at this for 21 years, the bulk of the money that students receive typically comes from the institution themselves. And many of them are very candid on their website about what that looks like, whether it's a very vivid description of those scholarships, or in some cases it's an instance where you make this GPA, you meet this test score, you get this amount of money. And so you can start looking around the college websites about the scholarships that are offered as well. Typically those are factored into things like that price calculator and the other programs that you're going to be looking at. But just know that before you start this search, private scholarships are plentiful, but they're also highly competitive. And so as you look at the criteria, sometimes it seems like, wow, that's pretty doable. And then you realize they give 5 per year nationally. And so really pay attention to all the criteria as you're going through this. One of probably, I would say the most reputable and most used source for private scholarship is FastWeb. FastWeb allows your student to put together a profile, and based upon that profile, FastWeb will pull up a list of scholarships that your student may be eligible for. I actually went in and did one. I just put in a few things. Let's see, what did I put in? I basically put in a student who is Akadesi. She has a 3.6 GPA. She plays golf. I put in her address as our physical address, and I put her in as, for her ethnicity, as white. and it came up with a significant number of scholarships that she may be eligible for just based upon that information. In fact, I think it was 64 scholarships, and it estimated about $250,000 may be available to her. But know that those scholarships range pretty drastically. Some of those are essay-based. You go and you write an essay, and you may or may not be awarded that scholarship. Others are more project-based. There are some around recycling, there are some around sustainability, and they want your daughter to put together a pitch of what she would do to fix a problem. Others are very much sponsor-based. There was one that I found that was quite interesting that I had never heard of this place. It's a pizza joint in Michigan that Cottage Inn has their own scholarship, and they say we're about to expand our market to China. What branding do you think we should really consider in expanding our market? And then here's scholarship money available based upon your pitch. So know that some of these are tied to advertising in a way. They are trying to get your business in addition to applying for their scholarship. Others are, nonprofit based, and then everything in between. So the first thing a student does is creates a profile, and parents and students can create a profile. But please, if you are creating a profile, use your daughter's information. Often I've had a couple of parents go through and put in their own information, and they got some really interesting results on FastWeb. But make sure you're using your daughter's information as far as graduation year and things of that nature. It's basically going to ask demographic info. Again, the basic is just ethnicity, where do you live, when do you plan to attend college, and birth date is really what in gender. And then it's going to ask for your academic profile, so your GPA, your grade level, your current test score, if you have that available. And really, just based upon those two things, it will start filtering and bringing scholarship opportunities for you. Then it'll dig down into things such as activities, community service. You can see lots of different things that you can put in there, and it'll start to really match you with those scholarships. There are some featured scholarships that pop up that are outside the range of information that you put in. So sometimes students get really excited because it pops up on their screen immediately as a featured scholarship, and it's a $200,000 scholarship or something of that nature. Keep in mind, if it says featured scholarship, that's not gone through any filters yet. That's just something on the front page that they're advertising there for you. And then as you start to go through there are different subscription settings that you can put in for your daughter. So do you want to get a weekly update? Do you want to get a monthly update? Do you want updates from third-party vendors, or do you only want those that come through the scholarship search themselves? I do like FastWeb in the sense that their privacy notice is that they will not share your daughter's information with third-party vendors unless she explicitly gives permission to do so. That's not true of many of the scholarship searches you'll see out there, but FastWeb is very clear about that. So you can go in and set those settings in a way to protect your privacy. And again, the student that I put in, 3.6, white female who plays golf. She wants to study psychology, by the way. And based upon just that information, 64 matches with a potential value of $289,750 came up. And then, of course, you go through that layer of filtering. Does it require an essay? Does it require a project? Is it solely based upon this information? In addition to that, there's a scholarship directory at the bottom of the page that you won't be able to see because it's tiny. But scholarships by year of study, scholarships for high school seniors, scholarships for college freshmen, veterans, bilingual students, Hispanic students, and you can go all the way down. So it will automatically set up some categories for you outside of the search that your students are looking for. In addition to FastWeb, there's an interesting new movement in the college scholarship world. These are what are called micro scholarships. This is Raise.me. It's a quite rapidly growing program where your daughter can go in and create a profile, and it will allow her to start earning scholarship funds at specific institutions. And they're micro scholarships, so they may be $200, they may be $500. But based upon her profile, and you can see that I put in Daisy Hockaday here. All I've entered at this point is I put in one grade, an English 1 grade and an A. I put in that I'm on the school yearbook, and then I do community service, and then my ACT is a 28. Based upon that, Austin College has already said I may be eligible for $27,000 in scholarships based upon that information. And so what this does is it really lets your students start to understand what are the criteria that college is looking at when awarding scholarships. And so by starting to do this up front, they can literally start earning that scholarship money at that specific institution should they enroll there. Now keep in mind, this is money that your daughter will probably already be eligible for from that institution, whether she goes through Raise.me or not. So this may be a tool that could be a motivator for some of you to use with your daughters. If they're a student who thinks, I'm not ever going to get any scholarships because I'm not a 4.0, 36 ACT student, you can start using this as they can go through just putting in their information, and all these little micro scholarships will start popping up. And you put certain colleges in your profile, and it'll start just banking that money as they go through. So it'll help a student really start to see that colleges do value students who don't, not necessarily have a 4.0 and a 36. And a place like Austin College seems to really value a student who's academically solid, but also has been involved in community service, yearbook, and some other activities. And so it's a really good way for your daughter to start really processing what are those factors that colleges are going to look at me in when awarding scholarship money. But they can enter their own academic accomplishments, their personal accomplishments, and as they continue to put those in their profile, the money will just begin to add up. Now, one of the things that on the back end of this that you'll see, the money isn't what we call stackable. So if your daughter is eligible for $25,000 a year academically based upon her ACT score and GPA at an institution, and she's already been awarded $25,000 through Raise.me, it's not going to be $50,000 from most institutions. It's going to be the 25 that you get through one or 25 that you get through the other. So just know that going into it. There are a handful of institutions that will stack some of these, but generally speaking, like I said, your daughter would already be eligible for that $25,000 based upon her GPA and test score, or she could get it by going through the Raise.me program. There aren't, all colleges aren't on this system yet. If you go in and you search some of our state institutions like Texas A&M or UT Austin, it'll say follow us, and that basically is Raise.me saying we'll notify you if they come on the system at some point. SMU right now has a very limited number of scholarships, so they're also one that you would follow. TCU is very strongly using this, as well as you can see a few others up there that are using Raise.me pretty significantly. We currently have 62 girls registered on Raise.me. We went in and looked at our report for us, and so we do have girls using this. And I went in this morning and saw that one of our girls, who I believe is Form 2, already has $12,000 banked in scholarships because she's been, kind of routinely adding and using the system. So the more you put into your profile, the more possibility there is for these micro scholarships to start adding up. So it's a pretty interesting and innovative way that colleges are, let's be honest, marketing to your daughters. Because up front they're saying, hey, based upon your profile, the fact that you showed interest in us, here's money that you'd be eligible for if you come to our institution. And so it's a great marketing tool, but it's also a great, in my opinion, motivator for students if they don't really feel that they understand how this works. But, we hear a lot of, in fact, I was talking to one of our Form 1 advisors, and she said, my freshmen are wearing me out because they believe you have to have a 4.0 and a 36 to go to college anywhere. And she's like, how do I convince them otherwise? And so we've been having those conversations, but again, this is a very real piece where a student can say, I have a 3.5 GPA, and I do this, and the college is going to say, hey, give you $750 for that. And so I think it's a great way for these students to see colleges are looking for a range of students who come with different sets of priorities and different backgrounds. But again, I think the micro scholarships thing is something we're going to start hearing a lot more about, just because it's a great marketing piece for the colleges.
Is this factor in demonstrating interest, and if you show interest in one institution, let's say you show interest in Austin College, is that going to SMUs and know if you're interested in them and you're interested in some
Yeah, but this is basically the school that you have entered gets your information, if the other schools are not going to see your information. And I'll tell you, that's one of the pieces right now. We're part of a national organization, the National Association for College Admission Counseling, that is very much on this demonstrated interest piece and what information colleges have access to, and really making sure that if my student's interested in Austin College, SMU doesn't ever know that. You know, your ACT scores don't reflect that, your FAFSA doesn't reflect that, and that's something that there's some pretty significant watchdogs out there looking at now to make sure that you can feel comfortable communicating with colleges in the way that you choose to, and that information should not be shared between colleges. So just know that's a big movement right now nationally. That's a great question.
That suggests that their colleges are saying that this amount of scholarship would be available to you prior to your child being applying. Does it happen that the numbers up there look really great when the child applies and then they don't get it?
Oh, that they don't get in? Yes, that does happen. So this is not guaranteeing that your daughter is going to gain admission to that institution. So that's a very good point. Could be. Could be. All right, I think we're going to show you some data about ACT, SAT scores, and then we'll answer any questions you have about what we're doing.
So we're going to switch gears. We'll certainly leave room for questions, but we did want to pull up some testing dates for next year. So late winter, early spring, word came out that College Board was going to add an August SAT date, which we're just really thrilled about. At first glance, when I started hearing about the summer test dates, a piece of me cringed, and I thought, oh my gosh, are we saying goodbye to summer vacation? But the more I think about it from a student and a family perspective, the more I think that this is actually a great gift that we can give, because what College Board and ACT is doing is giving the girls and juniors and seniors the gift of time. So let's focus first on the College Board. So what's happened is that College Board noticed that the January test date numbers were declining. And the fall, the October and the November dates were on the rise. And the College Board has an extensive advisory board. In fact, they have counselor and student advisory boards all over the country. And what the feedback that they were receiving was that the October and the November test dates were just too late for early action and early decision, and it really restricted the students. And so what College Board decided to do was eliminate the January SAT date and add the August SAT date. So for our juniors, they just took the last January, but now in comes August. And so we actually have some juniors this year who are planning on taking the SAT and some subject tests at the August test date. And so for sophomores in the room, as you start thinking about your daughter's junior year and she's looking to take the SAT, taking that for the first time could be November, December. Know that the March 10th date is the first weekend of our spring break next year. And then she could take it in May, June, or then August. And so it just takes the testing and pushes it a little bit more into the spring or the fall, should she decide to take sort of fall and winter to do a little bit more preparation. As we look next year to the ACT, so whenever the College Board makes a change, ACT follows suit pretty quickly. And so what ACT did, because, and I will stand on my soapbox, it's a kinder, gentler organization, is that they did not eliminate a test date, rather they added one. So where the College Board took away January, ACT said we're just going to add one. And July 2018 will be a new ACT test date. And so we're grateful for this next year because the April ACT date, and what you can't see here is that the April 14th ACT date is ISAS weekend next year. And Hockaday is hosting ISAS, so we will not be an April ACT test center next year because there's just no space with the 3,000 budding artists and thespians that will be running around. Other schools in Dallas will, but Hockaday will not. But then there's the addition of the July. We will be a July test center. I chatted with Charlotte Hoskins, who is our testing coordinator, and we will be offering the ACT here at Hockaday in July. It's July 2018. We have no idea how the girls are going to receive this, how families are going to receive this. But as you look towards your daughter taking, I'm grateful that there is still the February and the June. I can tell you most of our juniors are taking the ACT in December or February and reserving that June test date for a third if they need it. But we wanted to make sure that you all had these test dates. And for our freshmen, test dates will come out midwinter or so of next year, if not a little bit before. They even have estimated test dates on the website, but I always look at those a little cautiously before 12 months prior. So wanted to get those out in front of you because I think it allows for a little bit more flexibility, certainly in terms of the ACT with writing. So now, can we answer questions about really anything?
Can you just give a little primer on the two tests and what they're used for?
Yes.
Versus the other, versus, the priority of the one vote and actually when?
Sure, so ACT versus SAT. Do you want to
Sure.
answer that?
Interestingly enough, through the years, these tests look almost identical now. Once upon a time, SAT had a very different format from ACT. Now the formats are quite the same, and the content is quite the same. What you'll find the difference being is the timing of each of those sections. And so that's one of the things that we'll talk with girls about. Do you do better with multiple short sections, or do you do better with fewer longer sections? Otherwise, the content and the structure looks quite similar for both ACT and SAT. Colleges use these tests interchangeably. There is no preference to one or the other. And so girls can feel comfortable moving toward the test that is comfortable for them. Just so happens that this Sunday, yes, that's this Sunday, isn't it? We're getting the START-UP test. The START-UP test allows students to come in and take a test that's a blend of the ACT and the SAT. And what that does in the end is it will start to point them toward one test or the other based upon their performance on that START-UP exam. And so there are opportunities such as that to help students start to figure out which one may be a better fit. We typically do recommend that they give themselves the window of at least 3 opportunities to take the test. Typically 2 is the number that I see because research does show that there's more significant improvement of scores between the first and second test. Between the second and third test, there's a little bit of improvement, but not as significant. And after the third test, we start to see less improvement. I always tell my girls that's when you start to flatline. So let's count on 3 and no more. And so if you think about backing that up to when would you start that test, part of that is looking at their math skills and looking at how ready they are for the math portion of the exam. But as Mrs. Fair said, typically we're going to see students starting the SAT in November or December. And then for ACT, they're typically looking at December for that first test date of junior year. Keep in mind that with SAT, there also are subject tests that are available. Those are 1-hour individual subject exams that happen on the same dates as the regular SAT. It's a select number of colleges that require those at this point, and typically if they require them, they ask for 2 of those subject test scores. The exception to that is Georgetown, who likes to see 3. So right now, that's where they live in the SAT subject test world. And typically, our girls are going to take those subject tests in May or June of their junior year, at the end of their junior year, because those usually align with the AP exams pretty well. And so while they're preparing for those, they tend to be prepared for those subject tests. There are schools that do say that if you submit an ACT score to us, we require 2 SAT subject tests to come along with that. But if you choose to submit an SAT test, then we don't necessarily need those subject tests. Sorry? You said the ACT, 2 subject tests, yes. NYU is a school that does that, for instance. And so we do have to look at the individual testing requirements of each institution. And that's why we do typically recommend that all of our girls take at least 2 subject tests so they have those in their record should they need them.
Sorry, so this Sunday, can you repeat where and what time?
Sure.
Okay.
I was going to send a reminder out to the girls after this morning's coffee, and so they'll get another reminder. So for sophomores, the Princeton Review will be offering the startup, and that will be in Hicks on Sunday, starting at 1:30 in the afternoon. So, and what that is a great exercise in that they come in, and last year it took just under 3 hours. I've asked for confirmation of time, and I haven't heard back yet. And they take a series of questions. some of which are ACT questions and some of them are SAT questions. And then a week following, they'll get this really detailed report of what kind of questions they got right and which questions were more challenging to them. And it will say specifically, you answered 79% of these questions correct, you might be better geared towards the SAT and vice versa for the ACT. So, and it's actually, they really do also do a score and a skill breakdown as well. But there isn't a, based on these questions, you would get a 32 on the ACT.
Is there a difference in the writing portion, either subject or scoring between SAT and ACT?
You know, that's a good question that I don't know enough about to confidently answer in this venue. You know, they're based on pretty much the same writing skills. Our girls, when we look at the comparison scores, they're almost exactly the same, but I would want to look a little bit more into that. It's a good question.
We talked about it Sunday, but you just said for sophomores.
It's for sophomores. Yeah, it's geared towards sophomores.
Okay. Two questions. Do you recommend that they take both the SAT and the ACT, or should they pick one?
Typically, I do find that our girls are taking each at one time, seeing how those scores look, and then going back and retesting on one or the other. You know, one of the things we don't want is I don't want a girl taking 8 standardized tests to get into college, right? So I'm really comfortable if they take each of them one time to kind of see how it feels for them. We analyze both of those scores and determine which test they're going to pursue from there. There are other girls who walk into our office from day one and they say, I'm doing SAT and only SAT, and we support that and we help them prepare for that. But I'm really comfortable if the student takes them each one time, so we have a baseline score and determine where to go from there. There are a handful of schools that do require you to submit your entire testing history once you apply. And you know, there's lots of philosophical discussion behind that. And it's really, you know, knowing that some kids live in a world where they can afford to take a test one time with no formal prep, versus a kid who can do all kinds of formal prep and take it 6 times. And so these colleges believe they should know the full context when they're making a decision on a student. And so we want to be mindful of the number of times that our students test, because if they're sending 6 or 7 test scores, you know, how does that evaluate versus a kid who sends a couple? So we want to be thoughtful, but I'm very comfortable with my students taking them each one time and then determining which test to pursue from there.
I am too, and just to give you a sense of the landscape, we are a very popular office for test prep companies. We get calls regularly, we have visitors. Security is great at keeping them at bay. But there's some wonderful test prep companies out there. But across the board, they're really leaning towards ACT because of the redesigned SAT. We really saw an uptick in ACT takers amongst our juniors and our seniors, really because of the redesign. But I would caution your family to really question the test prep company about ACT versus SAT. They're just not yet confident with the redesigned SAT, and so it's in their best business interest to really promote the ACT. And quite honestly, for almost all of our girls, they do comparable on both tests. Our girls are stellar test takers. And receive great preparation in that way. And we are also happy to serve as a resource. We have guides in our office. We have a test prep resource list that we're happy to send out if anybody would like some suggestions. There's a lot of variants out there, but just be cautious consumers that right now the ACT is the way to go, and that just may not be the best for your daughter.
When do they do the test prep? When do they start that? Before the start of?
You know, that's such a great question. For a long time, we shared with families the best time to, and you and I may even have different answers to this. For a long time, our advice was really 6 to 8 weeks before a test. But our girls are busy. And you might have a thespian who's in the musical for whom it makes sense for her to take that March SAT, but by golly, she's going to be on stage. For some families, the summer. I mean, it really does depend on your daughter. It depends on your family's schedule. But what doesn't always work is if she takes test prep in the summer and then waits until the December SAT. She really does need to be fresh in her mind going in, but it really is family by family.
So non-sophomore year, junior year.
Not sophomore year, yeah. I would hold back on sophomore year.
We get a lot of questions about prepping for PSAT, and please know there's no reason to prep for PSAT.
Stop.
It's a practice test. Those scores go nowhere other than junior year. They do go to the National Merit, Corporation for scholarship opportunities. But outside of that, very, very 1% of students who receive that, there's no reason to prep for the PSAT. It's a practice test.
So what are the major changes like when you do the redesign of the SAT? Because earlier, like I have been out all this and all this freshman background. What I heard is that ACT is quite different from SAT, but what I'm hearing right now is they're kind of machine right now.
Yes.
So what are the major changes?
Sure, so the question is what are the major changes to the SAT? So what we're lovingly referred to as the redesigned SAT. The most dramatic changes are the fact that it's gone back to a 1600 scale. So for a long time it was based on a 2400 scale. So it was 800 points for each of the three sections, the English, the mathematics, and the writing. So they have eliminated the writing. More and more colleges are no longer requiring the writing section of the SAT and the ACT. However, the ones that do tend to be the most selective. Although that's shifting, and I think Form 1 families, by the time your daughters are juniors and seniors, there's going to be fewer and fewer colleges. I went to a great breakfast this fall with Dartmouth and Princeton and Northwestern and Berkeley, and I asked the question about how they use the writing, and Andrew from Northwestern said, listen, I trust English grades, and I trust the essay, and I trust the letter of recommendations more than I trust what the students did on a Saturday morning. And so there's some skepticism with that writing section for some. So it's good old.
Just good.
Yeah, so it's based on a 1600 scale. They've eliminated the vocabulary section, and so there's no longer a big SAT word section. Because really what the redesign was based in was actual knowledge. For a very long time, the ACT was known to be a test of knowledge, whereas the SAT was a test of how well you test. And SAT really was tired of that reputation, and so they wanted to more closely align themselves with the ACT, so it's more of a knowledge-based test. So what we used to know is the critical reading, not the English is at ACT. The critical reading section, the former critical reading section of the SAT is now called evidence-based reading and writing. And so they're pulling from the historical texts that our girls are reading in history and in English class. So it's a more practical test. And then, so it's critical-based reading, writing, the math. There's no more penalty for wrong answers. So it's really a more kinder and gentler test.
Can you say anything general about the effect of money, the difference between how or the wages that are given to income versus assets?
That is a great question. So the question is in review of financial aid policy, the weighting of income and assets? And the easiest answer to that question is it depends. It depends on the institution, and it depends on their own financial aid methodology. And so we are great opponents of picking up the phone and calling a financial aid office. Financial aid counselors are, in general, the most kindest, empathetic, thoughtful people I've ever met. And so once a list starts to get narrowed down, if there are particulars about a family's financial situation or how numbers will get addressed, that is just picking up the phone and calling. And that's also something that Mike Scott addresses in his financial aid presentation each December.
Well, okay, I would, at this point, you might have a sense of if there's differences in institutions in that regard.
You know what, I don't. I mean, I don't know if you know. It's so,
You, the collective view.
yeah, that's not something that tends to come up.
I will say, I was right now, who emailed me last night, there were bunches of exclamation points in the subject line, I'll just tell you that. Her dream school had come through with financial aid offer that wasn't anywhere near what she needed to be able to make that work. And so my best counsel was, you need to sit down with your parents, you need to call that office and say, you're my top choice, this is not financially feasible for me. Can you do another review of my files if there's anything you might be eligible for? And from that, they had questions about some real estate. And remember, this was 2 years ago, right? And some things have happened with the family in the past year, and so they were able to provide updated information, and an offer came through that was much more feasible for her to go to that institution. But that only happened because she picked up the phone and said, okay, here's what I see, but some things have changed in my family. Can you do another review of my file? They asked for some additional information, they sent it, and now it's going to be to work out for her. And so I think the process is more complex than it's ever been, because we are looking at 2 years back, and lots of things changed within that year, the course of that year. But each institution handles that very, very differently. I've had students call other institutions where they said, your offer is your offer, thanks for calling. So it varies pretty drastically from institution to institution.
And I could see that, especially with services change over the course of the year. So when you go to one of these websites and then price calculator, any of the ones you mentioned, you put in your information, it only takes 10 minutes. It's kind of like a black box. I mean, it gives you an answer, but you don't really know the algorithm underneath. Is that correct?
Particularly with my intuition, because those are all, the institutions are able to specify their own system. And that's what's so incredible, is that families will walk into our office with 3 very different financial aid packages. So their numbers, the family's numbers are all the same. The aid packages are all dramatically different. And it's just how, and oftentimes colleges also use what's called preferential packaging. And so they will base the financial aid award based on your daughter's admission rating. And so if they know that there's a highly talented student that they would like to recruit to their institution, there might be a little bit more scholarship and grant or free money than there is loan. So it's really interesting across selectivity and across how the college is using fund resources.
You can get some insight inside the black box though, because the net price calculator is not like an official application. So you can go in and say, my yearly salary is $25,000 and I have $4 million of land assets. Okay, I got this much money. All right, let's say my yearly salary is now $100,000 and I have $25,000 in land assets, and see how it changes. It's not like, they don't keep a record of it. The net price calculator is just an estimate. So you can look inside the black box.
So are majority of the scholarships being based or any other like outside of trade like kind of more on like sports and other criteria scholarships as well too, or only limited number of universities are doing those kind of scholarships?
Again, it varies by institution. Again, you learn a lot about an institution's priorities based upon where they allocate their money, right? And this may be an overgeneralization, but what you'll find typically, mid-sized private institutions have the most money to give. When you really start looking at, dollars and endowment funds, it's usually those mid-sized private institutions that have significant endowments. And that's a number you can find pretty easily on their website. And then typically they're going to categorize what types of scholarships they provide on their scholarship page as well. Are they talent-based? Are they purely academic? Are they need-based? And you can start learning very, very quickly about how they've categorized their money on their scholarship page. And then if you have trouble finding that information, that tells you something as well. But typically they outline pretty distinctly on their website where they've allocated their funds, whether that's talent-based, need-based, or otherwise.
When they provide a package to the student, do they provide it for all 4 years, or is that usually delineated, or do you have to keep doing it each year?
That's a great question. So the question is, does a financial package that arrives at the spring of senior year, year by year, or all 4s, and it's year by year? So the college's cost of attendance will change. It tends to go up every single year. For some schools, the financial aid package will change with it. You do have to reapply for financial aid every school year. You'll submit the FAFSA and oftentimes the CSS profile, which are the 2 financial aid documents. But usually if there's grant money, which is need-based free money, versus a merit scholarship, if there's merit scholarship or need-based aid, they'll usually usually be a little asterisk that says, in order to keep this, you need to keep a 3.5 GPA, but it will be yours all 4 years, so it changes, it can change.
Is it common that you see somebody get something that works for 1 year, and then they apply, they fill in the paperwork for sophomore year of college, and then it's like gone?
You know, it can certainly happen. I've not had that experience, no. I mean, colleges are committed, they don't want to lose students. That does not reflect well on them. And in this marketplace, certainly since 2008, affordability has been a top priority for many of the families looking at institutions. And so they are committed. Heaven forbid there be something horrific and tragic or great. Maybe if you win the lottery, then it's fabulous, and they'll ask you to put your name on the line perhaps. But no, I mean, it usually does, it does do the same. And I'm thinking now of families that I've worked with for whom it was going to be a tight squeeze. Those students have not left for financial aid reasons. So those kiddos are still there and thriving.
Typically, there are more department-based scholarships that become available as students progress through college. I know my personal experience, what I paid freshman year was far more than what I paid junior, senior year. But that's how you go and however you go and compete while you're on campus. That's when typically departmental scholarships are kicking in and some other things that aren't even eligible for freshmen. So depending on the institution, it can work out where it actually goes the opposite direction.
Can you talk a little bit about the timeline for the current sophomores? You mentioned that they may be testing fall or winter, but I thought we didn't actually get a college counselor until June. Can you just talk about when you start working with them and how long they're supposed to be getting ready for that other class?
Sure. So the question is really sort of the general timeline, so let me put these dates out there. We will see, so Form 2 families, we will get to see you in August. Again, so we have a big junior student family meeting right at the beginning of the year, and that date will be published in the calendar. And one of the first things that we talk about at that point in time is testing. And so we'll get the dates out there, we'll give our general recommendation. In November, we invite the Princeton Review. So we'll also offer, so we'll see you all in August, and then we will offer a mock SAT and ACT for juniors in October. And so there'll be an opportunity for them, so they can do the startup if they want to, but they can also come and take a full mock test here, which often helps, and those scores are back in early November, which often helps if they do any sort of test prep in November, December, January to have those mocks. Then the first or second week in November, we invite Princeton Review to campus to talk with both Form 2 and Form 3, and this is I'm adding Form 2 this year, to talk just generally about a lot of the questions that you've asked today. So what's the overall testing, what's the difference between the ACT and the SAT, they talk a little bit, and then also, sorry, I apologize, juniors will also take the SAT in October. So then by this point in time, Princeton Review comes in November. At this point in time, you and your family have looked at the calendar, you see what works best. Really, and then we start working with the girls in January, and at that point in time, there's still plenty of test left. I have to say, probably less than a quarter of our girls walk in, maybe a third of our girls walk into that first meeting with a test sort of already done and completed. Most of our girls are testing sort of winter into the spring, into the early fall. And really where our council can be most helpful is with the subject tests, right? So by the time it comes to talking about subject tests, we've got them in our office, we're looking at their list, we're helping them research. But if at any point a family is looking at your calendar, we often get these phone calls, particularly around the ACT. Our phone will ring, and please call at any point in time. If you're looking at your calendar and you're thinking, oh gosh, we don't know how this is going to happen, let's call Courtney or Micah or Elizabeth and see what will fluctuate. But that's usually one of the first conversations that we have with the girls in January. And we don't know how, this will shift. We don't know if the removal of the elimination of January will cause our population to go earlier or it will cause our population to go later. We just don't know that yet. And so we'll be interested to hear how it affects it. This change is having its greatest impact on independent schools because this is usually when, January is usually when a lot of independent school students are taking the SAT. And so we're watching this closely to see how it will shift a little bit. I'm very sensitive to time, and so I'd like to just allow for one more question, and then Mike and I are free to chat at the end.
I'm sorry, did you say it's a mock SAT or ACT?
Both. So I've got them, but not in my brain. Yeah, so those will all come out. It'll be on the calendar. It's late October. So one Saturday we offer the mock ACT for a few hours, and the next Saturday we offer the mock ACT. Yes. Thank you. It's been a fabulous coffee series this year. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope we've given you some information that doesn't send you screaming to the hills. But if it has, call us, and we're happy to answer questions. So thank you, and we'll see you all in the fall.